I remember that morning clear as frost on a horse trough. The kind of morning where the wind cuts through wool and bone alike, and every sound carries a mile. Whispering Creek was waking slow, smoke rising from the blacksmith's roof, the church bell ringing half-heartedly for a town that had long stopped listening. I came in for salt and nails, nothing more. At least, that's what I told myself. They were sitting by the general store steps, a woman and a child, faces thin, eyes hollowed by the sort of hunger that ain't just for food. The woman couldn't have been more than 20-something. Her dress was torn, her hands rough, but her back stayed straight, proud even when the rest of her looked ready to collapse. The little girl leaned against her, shoes with holes, a rag doll held tight. Folks walked past them pretending not to see. In towns like ours, pity was a luxury most didn't spend. Then, as I passed by with my sack of feed, the girl looked up at me, eyes the color of creek water after rain, and said, soft as wind, "Mister, can you take her instead of me?" Her sister gasped, tried to hush her, but the words already hung between us like smoke. I stopped, didn't move, didn't speak. What could I say to that? My throat burned with something I hadn't felt in years. I tipped my hat, walked on, and told myself it wasn't my business. But her voice followed me all the way home, riding the wind behind me like a ghost that wouldn't let go. That night I didn't sleep. The ranch was too quiet, just the tick of the lantern and the sigh of the boards. I thought about my wife and the baby we buried 3 winters ago. Thought about the blizzard that took them and left me with nothing but this silence. Maybe that's why, before the sun broke, I saddled my horse and rode back toward town, that I found them down by the creek bed, huddled beside a dead fire. The woman woke quick when she heard my horse. She stood, eyes sharp, like a coyote ready to defend what little she had left. "I ain't lookin' for trouble," I told her. "Just thought you could use some food." I dropped a bundle of bread and jerky by the ashes. She hesitated, pride fighting hunger. But the little one stared at the food like it was heaven itself. She whispered, "Please, Lila." The woman, Lila, finally took it, her hands shaking. "Thank you, sir," she said, quiet, ashamed that I rode off before she could say more. To be why noon. The gossip was already blooming through town. Clara Tinsley at the general store told anyone who'd listen, "Boone's gone soft, feeding drifters now. Next thing you know, he'll be bringing them home." The sheriff just grunted. He knew better than most what loneliness could drive a man to. That evening, I found them again, this time on my own land. They'd followed the creek up to where my fence crossed it, probably hoping for water. Lila looked ready to apologize, but I only nodded toward the cabin. "Got room in the barn if you need a roof." She wanted to refuse, I saw it. But the girl's knees were trembling, and the sky promised rain. "Just for a night," she said. "Just for a night." I agreed. The storm came sooner than we thought. Rain like needles. The barn roof rattled and moaned. I spent half the night holding the doors shut against the wind. When I turned, she was there beside me, soaked through, hair plastered to her face, clutching a lantern. "You'll get yourself killed out here," she said, and took hold of the door beside me. Lightning flashed, and for a heartbeat I saw the fear in her eyes, the kind that's been there too long. When the storm passed, the world smelled clean again. She looked at me, rain and tears mixing down her cheeks. "You didn't have to help us?" she said. "Didn't have to let me?" I answered that we said nothing more. The silence felt different that night. Not empty, just full of something neither of us could name. Over the next days, they stayed. Millie, the little one, took to the chickens like they were old friends. Lila helped patch fences, mend clothes, cook what little there was. Every act was quiet, careful. When she left bread on my table, I left a blanket by her cot. When she thanked me, I tipped my hat instead of answering. Out here, words were heavy things. Sometimes silence was kinder. But the world beyond my fence wasn't kind. Clara Tinsley rode out one afternoon, her voice sharp enough to cut wire. "People are talking, Elias Boone. You think talking in some stray woman makes you a savior? It'll ruin you." I just looked at her. "Then let it." She rode off angry because men weren't supposed to say things like that. That evening, the sheriff stopped by, chewing on a straw, pretending it was a casual visit. "Town's restless," he said. "Maybe you oughta send them on their way. They've nowhere to go." I told him that he studied me for a long moment. "Then make sure they find more than nowhere here." After he left, I sat on the porch, watching dusk settle over the valley. Millie was chasing fireflies, laughing for the first time I'd heard. Lila stood by the well, her dress glowing pale in the half-light. The sound of her laughter, soft, uncertain, felt like music I'd forgotten existed. Weeks slipped by. The whispers in town faded like a trail in the wind. Lila grew stronger, her face filling out, her eyes bright again. She sang sometimes when she thought no one was listening. I'd stop whatever I was doing just to hear it. Then one afternoon, trouble came wearing Sunday clothes. Clara returned, this time with 2 men and the sheriff behind her. "She's deceiving you, Boone," she shouted. "She's a runaway, dragging that child through sin and lies. You're harboring them." Lila stepped forward, trembling but unbroken. "Our father died in a mine. Our uncle sold our house. We walked till we couldn't. That's the truth, ma'am." The men shifted, uneasy. The sheriff looked from her to me. "You can turn them over, Elias, or sign for them to stay under your care." The world went still. I looked down at Millie, clutching my coat, eyes wide. "Please, sir, don't send us away." I thought of that first day, her voice trembling by the store steps. "Can you take her instead of me?" I looked at the sheriff, at the woman who'd spent her whole life judging others to fill her own emptiness, and I said, "Steady and sure." She asked me once to take her instead. "I reckon I'll take them both." Silence followed, the kind that humbles you. Even Clara couldn't meet my eyes. The sheriff nodded slowly, signed the paper, and left it on the fence post. "Then they're yours, Boone," he said. "All the law needs to know." After they rode off, Lila stood there, tears in her eyes. "Why'd you do it?" she asked. I shrugged. "Seemed like the right thing to do." She smiled then, a small, tired smile but real. "You saved us," she whispered. "No," I said. "You saved me." Life after that settled into something gentler. The ranch no longer felt haunted. Lila planted wildflowers along the porch. Millie's laughter filled every empty room. And me. I started to breathe again without realizing it. One evening, as the sun bled gold over the hills, the sheriff rode by. "Looks like you found your peace, Boone." "Peace don't come easy out here," I told him. "But sometimes, it rides in quiet." He nodded and left me to my thoughts. Years later, when I look back on that day in town, I still hear her voice. Small, scared, and full of something the world nearly beat out of her, hope. I never did understand why she said what she did, asking a stranger to take her sister. Maybe she thought she was already lost. Maybe she wanted to save the only piece of innocence she had left. But I reckon the truth is simpler. Sometimes a soul just cries out for someone, anyone, to say you belong somewhere. And when that call finds you, it ain't a choice anymore. It's a duty. The plains can make a man hard, but every now and then, the wind carries mercy across the dust. Quiet, trembling mercy, wearing worn shoes and holding a doll missing an eye. If you're lucky, you'll recognize it before it passes you by. So when people ask what happened to that woman and her sister, I tell them they stayed. The girl grew tall and fierce, learned to ride better than me. Lila planted a garden that still blooms every spring, even when the frost lingers. And me, well, I learned that a heart ain't meant to be a locked barn. It's a door you keep open, even when you're scared what might walk through. Sometimes, when I sit on that same porch, I talk to the wind and thank it for the day it carried her voice to me. Because mercy, I've learned, ain't loud. That it doesn't come with thunder or banners. It comes with a whisper, a question trembling in the cold. Can you take her instead of me? And if you listen right, you'll find yourself saying the only words that matter. I'll take you both.